We now return to our top story on EU-Ukraine Emergency Summit. Joining me is Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar, former senior diplomat. Good evening and welcome, sir. The European theatre appears in a sort of hyperactive mode as we speak, a flux of agendas, concerns regarding EU, Ukraine, US and NATO. Is it possible to gauge the direction in which it is headed?
Thank you very much, Shubhendu, for having me on the show. Yes, I think the EU countries are very, very confused. And, they are trying to see if there are even any straws that they can sort of, hang on to. And this is what they are looking at. The two of the leaders have gone and they have met the US leadership, whether it was President Macron to begin with, and after that, Keir Starmer. And they have had, some discussions, but the manner in which on the 28th of February there was a meeting between Zelensky and Trump, that did not go around well at all. And so the Sunday meet in London, that was basically how to deal with the change situation, because I think when the Sunday meeting was organized, was initially planned by the UK Prime Minister, they must have thought that the mineral deal would have been signed and there would have been at least some indication of the security guarantees that President Zelensky was asking for from the United States. But that unfortunately did not happen, and so Europe has come up with a peace plan of its own. But they are very certain, and I think one aspect, Shubhendu, that they seem to be absolutely certain about is that they cannot let go of the United States at this moment. So I think that is where the issue stands. And now there have been talks between Mike Waltz and the National Security Advisor of Ukraine. They say the meeting will take place between Russia, Ukraine and the United States. Not very clear whether Europe is going to be included in that. What are the terms? What is the commitment that Mr. Trump might have given to Mr. Putin in his conversation? That is not known. So that introduces a huge amount of uncertainty in the situation as it stands now.
Right. So how do you read the rather contradictory statements also coming out of EU leadership? President Macron of France talking about extending French nuclear deterrence to the other European countries and saying, and I quote, that Washington or Moscow cannot determine the destiny of Europe.
No, absolutely. I think he's very right, because, before this, there was the nuclear umbrella from the United States on all the other countries. So whether it is France or it is the United Kingdom, which is the other nuclear power in Europe, so they were not really required to take any stand on that particular score. But now that the involvement and the association of the United States has come under a huge question mark, so France has thought it necessary to declare that, to say that in so many words. And I think this is because if the uncertainty is there even over the nuclear umbrella from the United States, then what is the message that it sends to Russia? And that could be very, very disturbing for all the European countries, EU plus those who are not in the European Union. And that is why I think to give greater confidence to the other countries in Europe, France has come out with this declaration. And I think it will be a source of some solace and comfort and confidence to the other countries in Europe.
And so staying with that idea of contradictions within the European Union, the German leader, Chancellor Scholz, today speaks about not giving up on US nuclear support. So are there these challenges within the European Union, challenges of unity, challenges of speaking in a common consolidated voice that it is grappling with as we speak?
Yeah, Shubhendu, I think that's an excellent question. But, this is what the European countries tried to deal with in the London meeting. If you remember, they said it will be a coalition of the willing. So that
Right.
means those countries which are willing to participate in this whole initiative, they will come. It will not be a requirement, like if there are countries like uh, Hungary, which doesn't want to go ahead with the plan, or there might be some misgivings as far as Italy, Giorgia Meloni is concerned, or if there are certain misgivings as far as Slovakia is concerned. So, these two or three countries, then they can be excluded and all the other countries can go ahead. But, that having been said, I think there is a closing up as far as the ranks in European countries are concerned. There's been huge confusion, but I think these statements that are coming out, that we cannot let go of the American support. That was reiterated, you would recall, in London. That has been reiterated in Brussels. That's been reiterated by Olaf Scholz. Even by the new incoming Chancellor of Germany, Friedrich Merz. He's also said, we have to chart an independent course from the United States. But for the time being, there is no way that, they can chart an independent, plow a lonely furrow without the United States being along with them. Because they know that without the United States at this stage, they will not be able to help support Ukraine, provided the support that it needs. They will, of course, they've said, about $800 billion they are going to provide to Ukraine in the coming years. But then in terms of the military supplies, it's not only funding, it's also the military supplies. And they don't have, that sophisticated weaponry and equipment, or for that matter, satellite communication and intelligence, which has been stopped now by the United States to Ukraine, after this fracas between President Zelensky and Trump. So that has been stopped, and they had realized it even in London, that they cannot go it alone. They need the United States support, at least for the time being, for some time to come.
And so just to understand the complexities of EU geopolitics, the presence of President Volodymyr Zelensky in Brussels does bring the Russia-Ukraine conflict onto the forefront. But references to nuclear deterrence also brings into question the fractures that are being created in NATO itself, something that binds the West together. Hitato.
Yeah, you're right. You see, Shubhendu, because all this fracture and fissures, they have been visible. You leave the European Union aside, leave aside Hungary, leave aside, the slightly unsure position of Italy and of Slovakia. I think all the other countries are by and large on the same page. But the question mark that has come here is because of the involvement of or non-involvement of the United States. Because United States, which was a bulwark of support for European security and also providing the nuclear umbrella,
Right.
Europe is no longer sure of that. So if the United States doesn't come forward in providing this nuclear deterrence, then what do? I think the only alternative that they have is that France is independent nuclear power, a sovereign nuclear power, so it can use its nuclear capacity, nuclear capability to provide, to try and substitute what the United States had provided. Now, of course, everyone does understand that nuclear weapons are weapons of deterrence. They are not to be used. And so, this is also a messaging that is going through. You'd recall that right from February 22, we have heard these nuclear threats coming out of Russia also. Whether it is Sergei Lavrov or it is at times, even the defense minister, at times, even Putin himself has said, that if you are facing an existential threat, then we are going to use it. But of course, everyone knows that, if it's only Ukraine that is fighting, Russia will never be facing an existential threat. But still, Russia has been making all these threats. So I think it was good that France made its position very clear that we are there to provide an umbrella, even if we might not be very certain of what the US stance might be on this particular issue. But there are other nuclear weapon states, nuclear powers in Europe which are willing to take a stand on this issue.
And Ambassador Sajjanar, as President Donald Trump really overturns the earlier certainties of being a security provider, being a security partner for Europe, almost embracing an old foe, Russia, what is President Trump seeking to achieve?
I think basically this is what he's been, his own philosophy is not that of a globalist. For the last 80 years, what the ideology was that the United States, being the most powerful technologically, economically, militarily, it should support other democracies which are weaker democracies economically as well as militarily, and their security would be beneficial to the United States. Mr. Trump has completely jettisoned this idea. He's thrown it out of the window. And he says that all these countries have been taking the United States for a ride. And even as far as Europe is concerned, or NATO countries are concerned, so we are, or even its trading partners. So he is, pushing back against its allies. We've seen what he has done to Canada, to Mexico on tariffs, and what he has done to EU. And he has said that on the 2nd of April, there are going to be tariffs that are going to be imposed on reciprocal tariffs, of course, around the world. But he's mentioned that EU will come in for special attention because EU has been taking undue advantage, and that he wants it to stop. And as far as Russia is concerned, he said the United States should not be spending money to defend other countries. They should be responsible for their own security. And in that context, he thinks that, if he brings down the cost to the United States and ends the war, it is going to be beneficial as far as the United States is concerned. And maybe also allow the United States also to focus more strongly and intensely on the Indo-Pacific, because realizing that China is the real major strategic competitor as far as the US is concerned.
And so finally, in the context of the dramatic rift that we saw on our televisions last week between Zelensky and President Trump, his conciliatory letter and an apparent patch-up with the United States, what does it mean for the Russia-Ukraine conflict and for larger Europe?
I think it has basically, as I mentioned, that Mike Waltz, the NSA, the US NSA, he is in touch with Russia. He's in touch with the NSA of National Security Advisor of Ukraine also. And it is stated that, this is what the reports seem to be coming out, that very soon Russia, Ukraine, and the US will be meeting to discuss peace plans. I think there the big question mark is, what is it that the United States and particularly Mr. Trump has already conceded to Russia? Because Russian demands, if you look at what was discussed in Istanbul in 22, just after the conflict started, just after the war started, that was hugely damaging as far as Ukraine is concerned. And if there are elements from there that the United States has accepted, has conceded over the head of Ukraine, then I think it's going to be, the message that it sends out is going to be a very, against the interests of Ukraine and against the interest of Europe. Because what it would mean is that if a country is powerful, if a country is mighty, it can just walk into another country, seize territory, and get its demands accepted by the smaller country.
On that note, Ambassador Ashok Sajjanar, thank you very much for joining us on the News Hour and sharing your perspective. Let's now turn to other stories making news today.